In the past, if I had somebody who was standing in my way, I would pray prayers like, God, just move that person out of the way or do something to them. They're acting like my enemy. And then I realized that that's not what Jesus taught us. He taught us that you're supposed to pray for your enemies. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we started doing. But what I found was that if you're praying against them the way that we had been doing, you're actually creating your own kind of sin, and then that becomes a hindrance to getting the prayer that you're asking for to be answered. And so we found that if we started forgiving those people and praying for them, that it actually moved them out of the way.
So it's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting me.
I'll call you Dr. Scott.
You bet. Okay. Whatever you like.
Okay. You've been helping us out, but it's wonderful to meet you now. So now we can actually have a relationship, a medical relationship with you. So we're looking forward to that relationship continuing.
Likewise.
So now I'd like everyone to understand what it is that we've been going through and how it's changed our lives. So I'd like really for you to start back where you went to school, what you studied in your undergraduate and your graduate studies, and then residency, and then we'll talk about how that took a turn and how you've come to what you're doing now.
So I didn't actually go to medical school. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express. No, I'm kidding. I went to Creighton University School of Medicine in Omaha, Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Graduated from there in 1989, and then did my residency at Duke University Medical Center. And then I've been in Roswell for 32 years after that.
So that's in New Mexico, right?
That's in New Mexico, yeah, where they had just had the big floods.
Right.
Not like Valencia, Spain, thank God, but yeah.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
I guess it's flood season.
I guess. What's up with that?
It must be. It must be flood season. I don't know.
Exactly. So it's time, for
I know it's
for
hurricane
mold.
season, right? So it must be flood season. That would go along with it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, everybody, you haven't had any trouble with that, though?
We had a little bit of water come in under the doors at my office, but my family and I got in there. We got it all cleaned up within an hour or two.
Yeah.
And we got it all dried out within 24 hours. So we're not going to have any mold.
Right.
But some of our friends, some of the people we go to church with and whatnot, even one of the ladies that I work with, had some pretty extensive damage. Some people completely lost their home.
Oh dear.
And a lot of cars were swept away. Like 250 cars just floating down the main street like they're swimming or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, it's wild. We have no conception really of how strong nature is until something like that
exactly.
happens, right?
We were
in Florida last year when they had, after all of the floods and storms were over, and we were driving up the highway, and I saw a boat in the middle of the forest.
Oh my.
It was not near the marina.
You don't think somebody drove it there, do you?
No, I don't think so.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I get the immensity of this, to bring a large boat and then to land it in the middle of a forest, that's a big storm.
Yeah.
And so, these storms can be harrowing, I imagine.
We
just have winter up north, right?
Right. I've never experienced anything like that. I mean, I was actually in Hurricane Ian when it happened, but I was on the the east side of Florida. So I just got a bunch of rainfall, and I was actually able to fly out the day that it made landfall. And I've been through a couple of hurricanes when I was in North Carolina, but again, none of them really came in and damaged us. They were 50, 100 miles away from us. But to see this, and we had 5.5 inches of rainfall in about 7 hours. Well, we get 11 inches of rainfall a year.
Right.
Because we're in the desert, really. Yeah. It was pretty amazing to see the cars washed away, bridges washed out, and things like that. It was by God's grace.
Yeah, by God's grace, that's for sure. So you said you didn't go to medical school, but you were
kidding.
teasing me.
Yeah.
And then you did a residency. Where did you do your residency?
I did at Duke University Medical Center.
Okay.
I did residency in pediatrics.
Oh yeah.
And finished that in 1992, and then moved to Roswell and did pediatric practice for 28 years, and
Right.
I still do hospital work.
I see.
So,
I see.
yeah.
And so then, how did you find out about CIRS?
Oh my.
Which is what we're going to talk about.
Oh my. Which story do you want?
Well, the first one, I guess, because you were a pediatrician, right?
I was a pediatrician. So there's kind of a divine inspiration story, and then there's a kind of a...
We'll have both those, the divine one and the everyday kind of run-of-the-mill one.
The intellectual pursuit one.
Yeah, so there's that one, yeah.
The divine one certainly came first. It was in 2009, and it was in, I think, August, and I was asked to give a talk at a medical meeting in January. And I had spoken before this group before. This is like maybe the 5th year in a row that I had spoken. And I couldn't think of a topic. I didn't know what they wanted to talk about, and one of the representatives of the meeting worked at the same hospital I did, and he'd see me all the time, and he'd ask me, and I don't know. So he kept bugging me, and I mean, the truth is I need to give them a title so that they can get their continuing medical education units and whatnot. So I'm a man of faith. I've been a pastor. I've done missionary work and things like that in the past. And I just prayed about it. I said, okay, God, what do you want me to talk about? I thought I'm going to hear like asthma, or
right.
Cystic fibrosis, try and get my voice really deep now. And what I heard was, and I heard this. It was just a couple of days after Thanksgiving that year. I heard him say, pediatric mold exposure with a colon, the next great epidemic with a question mark.
Is that right?
Yeah. And it's like, what? I mean, I've never even...
That's what you say when you hear something like that.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know anything about mold. You want me to I'm supposed to give a 1-hour talk with a PowerPoint, and I don't know anything about mold-based illness. And I just said, okay, fine, if that's what you want. You have 10 weeks to teach me about this because I don't know anything about it. And so I typed an email right then to these people, and I said, this is the name of my talk, pediatric mold exposure, the next great epidemic, ? So I guess that's living by faith. And then 3 weeks later, somebody came into my office and asked me if I would help a local businessman in his lawsuit. Mm-hmm. And I said, isn't he suing the local school district over his daughter getting sick from mold? And it's like the light bulb went on. Right, and I said, yes. And so I said, yeah, I'd be happy to meet with him. And, I can find some good references and I can start my study of this because I was really kind of confused studying it before because there was some controversy in the literature. Mm. And I'm not used to controversy in the literature. Usually it's very straightforward. What I know now...
What was the controversy that you recognized?
Yeah, what I know now is there are people that are just studying this, and they are... and those results come out and show almost every time that if you live in a moldy house or you work in a moldy building or you go to a moldy school, you're more likely to get ill in a number of different ways. And they talk about respiratory systems, but also you get headaches and you get chronic fatigue and stomach issues and bone and muscle problems and aches and pains and brain fog and neurologic issues, and all of that is in the medical literature. But there are also a very few relatively prominent articles from people that tend to testify for the defense in mold litigation cases that say the opposite. Mm. And when you study them out, you realize that their results are really pretty bogus. I mean, they don't have human data. They substitute in rodent data from like gerbils or rats or mice, and you're really not supposed to do that epidemiologically. I mean, that's one of the keys is you can't use animal studies to prove or disprove causation in humans, and yet that's exactly what they've done. And
how long has that been going on for?
Since 2002. Mm-hmm. The first really big lawsuits for mold came out around 1998, 1999. And so shortly after that, you start seeing these publications that say that mold can't make you sick, other than like a runny nose or a cough or something like that. And yet the worldwide literature says the exact opposite.
And where was that coming from mostly, that worldwide
From all over the world, from China, from Europe, from not so much from Africa, from Australia, from Asia, from the United States, from Canada, a little from Mexico too. So in 2020, Ming Dooley, Ming's originally from San Diego area, she and I published a systematic review. Systematic review is looking at all the information that you have in the peer-reviewed published literature and trying to come to a conclusion. Mm-hmm. So we looked at everything that had been published between 2011 and 2018 that referenced either increased indoor dampness or increased microbial growth. And we looked at that against adverse human health effects. And we found that 98.2% of the literature supported our point of view and not what the defense people are trying to bring. And it just was a real eye-opener.
So were the defense people associated with any governing bodies like insurance companies? Maybe? That could have been a possibility?
They tend to be paid by insurance companies because that's, for some cases, it's the insurance company that pays the defense expert witness.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're motivated, obviously. They're motivated to...
I don't want to guess what their motivation is. I know that my motivation is truth. I want to know what the truth is. And that's how I got involved in this. I mean, there was the divine part, but then there was I really want to know what the truth of this is. And so I studied it, and I've been doing it now for 15 years. And I have more data than you can shake a stick at. And it's very obvious that exposure...
Do people come from all over to see you?
Yeah. We've seen people from 48 states and 23 countries at this point.
Oh, why?
Yeah.
My. Who was the first person that you found?
First person, so I mentioned that there was a local businessman and whose daughter had been ill, and he said it was because one of the schools in town had mold in it, and that's why she got sick. Mm-hmm. And so I met with him, and he wanted to show that there were other people from the same school that had the same illness. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I wouldn't even know how to do that. And he said, well, I'm working with Dr. Shoemaker. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Shoemaker had suggested a list of lab tests to do on these people to show that they have these abnormalities. And I said, well, yeah, I could do that. And I said, to do that legally and ethically, I actually need to sit down with them. I need to ask them some questions, quick exam, and I need to have enough information from them that will allow me to order these tests in an ethical kind of way. Mm-hmm. He said, yeah, we can do that. How many people do you want? And I said, well, can you arrange 30? He said, yeah, not a problem. I was like, are you serious? You could do 30? So a week later, I started seeing these people, and in about 2 weeks, I saw 15.
Okay.
And 13 he provided. 2 of them were my own patients. They were people that I realized, they have the same kind of problems these people do. So I asked them to come and be a part of this group. And what we found was, and these are almost all teenagers. One of them was a teacher from the school who was, in her late 40s, but they were almost all almost all students. And what I found was that on average, they had 21 symptoms. Now, you don't think of 14, 15-year-olds as having a lot of symptoms. Mm-hmm. And another crazy thing, pediatrics, rarely has illness that affects more than one system of the body. So, like, for instance, if you get asthma, it affects the lungs and the respiratory system, but it doesn't so much affect anything else. Mm-hmm. There are a few, you can get cancers and you can get diabetes and things like that, but they're fairly rare. It's pretty uncommon to have illness in teenagers that affects multiple systems of the body. We found on average that I think it was 7.6 of the 9 systems that I was evaluating were affected. Mm-hmm. I was like, that's massive. But I'm still wondering, is this really real? I mean, So we did the lab tests. Now, I don't know how much you know about statistics and all, or your listeners.
I know some, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But, with the average bell-shaped curve and whatnot, you would expect that 95%, if you did a whole bunch of lab tests on healthy people, mm-hmm. you would expect that on average, 95% would be normal, 2.5% would be low, abnormal, and 2.5% would be high, abnormal.
Right. And a bell curve is a normally distribution.
A normal distribution,
It looks
exactly.
kind of like a bell, and the majority of people are in the high part of the bell, and then the outliers are there, and then there's low outliers and high outliers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and that's normal, and that's actually how we make reference ranges for the lab tests that we do. Is we do a statistical analysis. We get the bell-shaped curve, and we say these outliers at the 2.5% high are going to be abnormal high, and the outliers at the 2.5% low are going to be abnormal low. So, if you do a whole bunch of tests on a bunch of healthy people, 5% abnormal, split evenly, give or take, between the high and the low. Mm-hmm. But that's not what we saw. We saw that 58% of the lab tests were abnormal. And most of them involve the innate immune system. They involve your immune system and how it's functioning. And if anything made me a believer, that did. Because this is objective evidence. You can make symptoms up, or I'm not saying that they did or people do, but you can. But you can't make lab tests up.
Right.
When they're abnormal, they're abnormal. Mm-hmm. And I saw that and I was like, jaw drop. And then I shared my de-identified lab testing results with Dr. Shoemaker, and he had very similar results in number of symptoms, number of systems involved, abnormal lab tests and whatnot. And I thought, this is for real.
So this is Dr. Richie Shoemaker?
Dr. Richie Shoemaker, yeah.
And
the guy who discovered it.
And he's the one who's developed the Shoemaker protocol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that is a mold detection protocol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then because I hadn't really heard about this before, and I was kind of wondering why I've never heard about it before, I actually arranged to go visit Dr. Shoemaker, meet him in person, and spend a couple days with him in his office. And he showed me everything he did. He showed me how he collected data. He showed me how he saw patients, how he took a history. I mean, just everything was very legit. And it's like, this is for real. And I came away from that, and I offered these 15 people, treatment now that I had some understanding what the treatment was. And 5 of them took it very seriously and got treated, and they all got better. And 10 of them, a couple of them did the treatment, but they only did it for a few days or whatnot. I mean, they just didn't take it very seriously, and they didn't get better. And in retrospect, I mean, over the next few years, several of them came back, and they got treated, and they got better. So everything that I look for a pattern of illness, a pattern of physical exam findings, a pattern of abnormal lab tests, and a pattern of improvement with appropriate therapy. All of these boxes were checked. And it's like, this is for real. Not everybody knows about it, but this is a real entity.
Now, what year was that?
That was 2009, 2010.
2009, 2010. And so let's see. So you verified that this condition exists at this point.
Yes.
You're thinking, yes, this is something, and people are suffering.
Yes. Went looking for the truth and found it.
Yeah, and it's not just adults, it's children.
Adults and children.
Right, so I imagine, and you being a pediatrician, that would be something that you would be sensitive to.
Absolutely.
Because those are the people that you've been most concerned with in your years of practice before that.
Yes.
So then once you'd done the study and you'd found that it was true, what were your next steps there?
So I did a couple of things. At the time, I was working for a federally qualified health clinic, and I was under contract for another year with them, and I contacted them and said, I really feel like I'm supposed to do this kind of medicine in addition to what I do for you, but I don't know of a way that I can integrate it into my daily practice with them. I was doing 5 to 15 minute visits and whatnot, and my initial visit for a CIRS patient is usually about 2 hours. And there's just no way to fit that in. And so I said, if it's okay with you, I'm gonna basically just do this on my own time. And nobody said, no, you can't. So I opened my own practice and started seeing people in my own house on the weekends and at nights. And it started with those 15 families that I mentioned, and eventually I had hundreds. And then after that year was up, opened my own pediatric practice with the nurse practitioner I've been working with for years, and I just couldn't stop seeing it. I started seeing these patients with chronic headaches, and I thought to myself, nobody knows in pediatrics what causes chronic headaches. So why don't I just evaluate these kids and see if maybe they have CIRS? And sure enough, about 90% of them would have the abnormal lab tests that would signify that they had CIRS, and they usually had multi-system illness, unless they were really young, like 5 years old. So then I would treat them with a standard Shoemaker protocol, and they would get better time and time again.
Right, so children usually, like you said, have one system that's out of whack, but these people would have a number of systems out of whack, and so then that would be a cue, too, to test them
exactly
in this way.
Exactly. And by the time kids get to be about 11 years of age, they'll have multiple systems. 4, 5, 6 systems involved. But kids, sometimes they just have one when they're first starting out. Yeah. And so I learned to figure out how to recognize that. Another common symptom that they would have is just chronic fatigue. Now, we would call those kids, the couch potato.
Yeah, lazy or something.
Lazy, exactly. Brother's out playing sports and they're just sitting watching TV.
Yeah.
And, all sorts of different derogatory things we could think.
Yeah.
But then you do their blood work and you realize that they have CIRS, and you treat them, and now they're out running around and playing.
Yeah. So they just don't have, when people, you see people, they talk about other people that they're not as fit. Well, if they would just get out there and go to the gym, 3 times a week, then they'd be, I don't know why they don't do that. When they're sick like that, they actually don't even have the energy to go to the gym.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And if they do go to the gym and they really work out hard and whatnot, there's a really good chance that the next 2 or 3 days they're going to be in bed, because our body is really awesome, and it allows us to do a lot of things, and it allows us to compensate. And what I mean by that, when they compensate, is it allows you to go beyond what you really can and should do. Mm-hmm. But then there's a price that you pay for that.
Right.
And the price that you pay for overexerting yourself today, when you can't make a proper amount of energy, the price that you pay is you're in bed for 2 or 3 days while your body deals with the side effects of of those compensatory mechanisms.
Will you move your mic down just a little bit? I can't quite see your chin. Just down.
Oh, you want to see my chin?
I want to see your chin.
There we
go. There we go.
How's that?
That's much better. Well, let's see.
I assume we're going to edit that part.
What's that?
I assume we're going to edit that part?
Oh, yeah. I have a producer.
Okay.
He'll take care of things. So.
I can see your chin, by the way.
Good.
Okay.
Well, that's what we want. We want to see each other's chins. So, school. So, once you were treating these kids, then did you look at the buildings then that they come from?
Oh yeah, there was a time in Roswell, I think we had 21 elementary schools and 4 junior highs or middle schools and 2 high schools. And I could tell you where the mold was in every one of those buildings because of the kids that I dealt with and the parents that had gone through. I mean, this was before COVID and lockdown, where parents could go into the buildings and look around and sniff and whatnot. And I also took care of people that were like electricians and plumbers for the school system. And so they pointed out other areas that I wasn't even aware of.
Right. Ah.
Yeah.
And so what did you do with that information?
Oh, we talked to the school district, but because they were involved in litigation, they didn't really want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But they did the right thing, and they got lots of money. And that one particular school that I was mentioning, over the next few years, they did remediation on it. I think in the next 6 years, they remediated it 3 times. And the number of patients that I saw from the school was going down, so I was pleased by that. Mm. Of course, they came out and said that they were removing the asbestos. And it's like, well, I've been here long enough. I know you removed the asbestos about 15 years ago. I remember. And I talked to people who had done it, but I didn't make a big deal about it because they were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that.
Maybe they were hesitant to share what exactly they were doing?
Because of the potential for litigation again.
Right. There's
I get it.
That.
Yeah. Never admit it. Deny.
Yeah.
Isn't that the way we do it?
That's the way we do it.
I see the same thing with the military, too. Just deny.
Right. Because there was a point, I think I remember in listening to what you've been doing, that there was a chance to address the military barracks and housing in the military, but then COVID happened and then nothing happened.
That's exactly right. There was some momentum building, and I had in 2019 the opportunity to speak to the Government Accountability Office of the United States and then also to adjuncts of the House and Senate Armed Services Committee. And they had been around, they had looked, they had been to bases, they had seen the barracks, they'd seen base housing, they knew what I was talking about. And there were a couple other experts there with me. And they understood, and they made a presentation to Congress, and 16 days later, they approved a $300 million bill to start studying this and start improving things. And then the next day, they impeached President Trump for the first time. And we went through that media cycle, and then as soon as that was over, we had that little thing called COVID, and all that momentum was stopped. And I mean, there were offices that were calling my offices from DC, Washington, DC, saying, hey, let's get together, let's talk about this. And then when COVID hit, it's like just Washington, stopped. DC just shut down.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was brutal, wasn't it?
It really was.
In so many ways that we still don't know, I don't think.
Right. Well, the momentum is building again, and there are a number of lawsuits against the companies that own the military housing, and some of them are being settled, some of them are going to trial. There was a recent $10.5 million settlement with one of the companies, and so eventually someone will come in and regulate it and say, you just can't provide housing like that to our GIs anymore or to their families.
No.
I mean, these people are offering up their lives, and we're giving them slums.
Right.
It's just not right.
No, it's absolutely not right. But there's many issues now, I think, in our society that are misguided, and so we'll just have to tackle them one at a time.
Yes.
That's all we can do, because we can only do one thing at a time. So just tackle them one thing at a time, and not expect things to be taken care of without our participation.
Right.
Right?
Well, and your podcast and your husbands and your daughters are bringing more and more awareness to the fact that there is a problem. And eventually there will be enough outcry that people can't just bury their heads in the sand.
Yeah, that's right. So you've written 3 books?
I have.
I only know of one book. I know of one book. It was a book, I think, that Jordan had, The Art and Science of CIRS Medicine. But there are 2 other books as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wrote a book. I think my oldest son was in middle school, and it was on chess. And when I was younger, I played a lot of chess, and in high school I played a lot of chess and tournaments and whatnot. And so I wrote a book just about the basics of chess and how to beat most people. I don't know nowadays that it would be, now the chess has really taken off over the last 4 or 5 years, and so I don't know that it would be that helpful anymore.
It might be helpful to those of us who could use a few pointers.
It might. And then I wrote one with Dr. Shoemaker and Dr. Andy Heyman called The Art and Science of CIRS Medicine, which is really more like a medical textbook. And I think it's interesting for patients and whatnot, but it was really written more for providers to give them a basis for it. There are case reports in there, showing some of the nuances of how we treat CIRS and whatnot. And then the other one is called Boot Camp, a Beginner's Guide to Spiritual Warfare.
Okay.
So as I mentioned before, I'm a man of faith, and it's just about some of the basics of praying and what you're trying to accomplish when you're praying and what doesn't work when you pray.
Oh, well, I'm interested in that.
Oh yeah, well I'll get you a copy.
Yeah, because I pray the rosary every morning.
Okay.
And I've looked a little bit into spiritual warfare because I actually think that's probably true, and so I'm curious to know. I prayed St. Michael the Archangel's prayer,
right?
Which is a good thing to do if you think you're in battle. But that's about as far as I know. So I don't have a lot of prayer tools that I can use.
I will get you a copy.
Okay.
It's a fascinating book.
I'm sure it is.
Yeah, it really came about from kind of a download that I had once while praying, and God just showed me what a lot of people do wrong in prayer, and why their prayers sometimes aren't answered the way they want them to be. And that was the idea behind that. I'm actually getting ready to write a second book, which is a sequel to that.
Oh.
During COVID, my wife was in nursing school, and we had both felt like God told us not to get COVID vaccinated. And of course, I'm working in the hospital and whatnot, and they were very kind and allowed me an exemption, so I was able to continue working there. But her nursing school did not. And there was only one clinical site that amounted to a total of 8 hours that she had to spend there out of a 2-year program, but they wouldn't allow her to do that. And as a result of that, she ended up getting thrown out of school.
Wow.
It was like pretty astonishing to me, but we prayed and we prayed and we prayed, and we saw God change things and turn things around, and before you know it, she got reinstated right before her final semester and was able to complete it.
Oh, thank goodness.
So I think it's going to be a really awesome book, because we learned a lot as far as how to go about praying. Like, here's an interesting thing. In the past, if I had somebody who was standing in my way, I would pray prayers like, God, just move that person out of the way, or do something to them. They're acting like my enemy. And then I realized that that's not what Jesus taught us. He taught us that you're supposed to pray for your enemies. And so that's what we started doing.
People find that so confusing.
Right.
Pray for your enemies? Are you
joking?
Right.
But what I found was that if you're praying against them the way that we had been doing, that you're actually creating your own kind of sin, and then that becomes a hindrance to getting the prayer that you're asking for to be answered. And so we found that if we started forgiving those people and praying for them, that it actually moved them out of the way.
Right.
Much more effectively than praying against them.
Yeah, because the way that I've tried to understand that was that if I pray for someone who I'm, afraid of because of what they may do or what they have done or whatever, if I can pray for them to become closer to Jesus, then they'll make better choices.
Exactly.
And that's about all that I can hope for.
Well, that's it, because everybody has choices.
Yeah. So I'm very interested in that.
Yeah.
Especially at this time, because there's so much misunderstanding.
I'll send you a copy of that too.
Okay.
I just have to write it first.
Well, I can read the first one.
Okay.
Okay. I'd like to do that. Okay. So let's talk about. So now you've been a doctor, and you've been talking about and treating mold extensively since 2009.
Yes.
And recently you've decided that you're going to build a clinic that's devoted to this disease.
Oh my.
Yes?
How do you know about that?
I looked at your website.
Okay. We're in the process of it. We've bought the first piece of land. We've talked with the owner of the second piece of land, and we've come to an understanding. We're meeting with architects I've researched for quite a number of years the kind of materials that I would want to use.
The CIRS wall. So we looked into that. We haven't, but Michaela and I, since we've learned about you and Dr. Shoemaker and Michaela has found her health again. One of the things that Michaela and I are interested in is setting up a place that people could go, and I thought maybe a couple of houses, or maybe even 4 houses or something, that people could come and stay in, but that's about as far as I've thought through it. So I'm very curious to know what your plans are.
So we have a number of different areas that we're looking at doing within the land that we have, and then expanding to the land that's like across the street. So there are 5 different portions of it. One of them is a clinic, And we may or may not have like a day spa with it, but it'll be a nice day spa.
It would be nice.
It's going to be a nice day spa. And then we're going to have little casitas, so which are like little houses. Some people call them like mother-in-law houses, where people could come and stay. And they could stay for their visit for a day or two, or they could stay for even a couple of months or so. And we would maintain them, that we would build them, first of all, with materials that are less likely to have mold, because mold is their biggest problem. And getting out of mold is the most important part of their treatment. And some people just don't have the resources to be able to do that.
Right. They can never get well enough to even address the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So here they could come and stay for a month, 2 months, 3 months, maybe even 6 months in this little casita that is designed specifically to allow them to heal.
Yeah.
And then when they leave, we have cleaning practices that we can do to make it just as good for the next people that come. So that's the second phase of it. A third phase of it is agriculture. And so we have some land that's set aside specifically to grow our own crops and to provide food, and for people that are living there to be able to provide them with fresh food. There's another section where we'll actually have housing for people that just want to come and live there, where they can actually buy their CIRS wall house. So we'll also provide food for them. And then the last section of it is a training center. And there's at least 3 parts to the training center. One of them is construction, and specifically CIRS wall construction, the ability to then build houses for people within our community, or maybe even expand outward. The second part is a culinary portion, where we're actually making food for people that come to visit, have a personal chef program where for local people who want a personal chef, and giving experience to the people that are going through the school. And then a third portion of that for people who want to learn more about computers, computing, software, hardware, the whole thing.
Oh, I see.
And so this big center that does all of these things, and that all integrates into each other, and they all support each other.
So why computers?
That's the part I haven't figured out yet.
Oh, I see.
That's why I saved it for the last. When I first had this understanding, this vision, this idea that I'm talking about came to me in 2003. I didn't even know about mold until 2009.
Right.
So I really didn't know what this whole thing was about. And at that time, I understood that the school was to have 3 components to it. That there was a cooking portion, there was a construction portion, and there's a computer portion. I don't have the vision on the computer portion yet, but I will.
Yeah.
In time. God is good that way.
You know, I did Jordan's future authoring program.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, when he was first developing it. So I can't remember how long ago it was. It was pencil and paper.
Okay. Wow, that was like last millennium.
It was a long time ago, maybe 2010, something like that.
Okay.
And he said, go through this program and see if it makes sense to you, you know. And I had not had a lot of parental guidance, so I had always looked to books to find my way, and I had read a book called What Color's My Parachute, which is a career book that lots of people know about, and it helped me choose what I was going to study in university. So I'd already had a little bit of experience in looking for a self-help kind of guide, you know. Anyway, so I thought, okay, I'll do this program with Jordan. And in it, at first what you do is you spend 15 minutes and you just kind of dream about what your future might be like. And I dreamed up a place that was it wasn't urban, it was rural, or at least it was rural in my vision. And there was no cement around, so it was, the roads were gravel roads, and when you walked in, it was had a lot of windows in it. It had a juice bar at the front, and it had a lane pool, and it had these other spa rooms where you would do yoga or have massages, and that's about what I saw.
You're describing what I'm describing.
Yeah, and I have another friend. She's an osteopath. She had that same vision as I did.
That's fascinating.
And I met her in massage school, and she had a very similar. So this is coming.
Yeah.
This is coming, and it's coming like right now in your life. It may
slowly.
come. Well, and I've done some of that on a small scale, but I'd like to do it on more of a public scale to help people. But we'll see what happens, because these things, well, they happen in God's time, not in our time, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
But that's good. That's encouraging to know that you're doing that. Now, the firewall construction, I find that very interesting. So it's actually called rammed earth, right?
It's rammed earth. It's a technique that's been around for thousands of years.
And so it is, it can be used in what kind of climates can use it?
Any climate.
Any climate.
Any climate.
Even up around the North Pole, like those people could.
I don't know. I haven't asked them about that, but
Canada?
I definitely can. In fact, the people that created it are from Salt Spring Island in British Vancouver.
I know where that is.
Yeah, or British Columbia.
Yeah.
Why would I call it British Vancouver?
Well, it's close there.
It seems, yeah.
It's close there.
But yeah, so the people that developed it are there. They have their primary office is actually in Canada, and then they have a secondary office just outside of Phoenix for their American projects. But they've built all over the world. And I've asked them that. I haven't asked them about the North Pole, but I have asked them about like Florida and very humid kinds of areas.
Yeah, especially Florida. Huh?
And they said, no, it works great. In fact, it helps absorb some of that excess humidity, so you're less likely to develop mold.
Yeah, well, that's a place that could really have that done, because there's mold in all, I've heard, in all the HVACs.
Yes.
Because it's so humid. Anywhere there's a lot of humidity, then the air system for the house is going to have mold in it.
Yeah.
And that's brutal, because then you're just breathing it in, right?
Correct. It's just spewing it all throughout your house.
Oh my goodness. So what would someone have to do if their house, they have a pretty good house, but they wonder about their HVAC and how clean it is? What would someone have to do to find out whether it's full of mold or if it's good?
So there are people that can test the HVAC and that can inspect it and can even clean it out. Of course, you want to find people that are experienced and that actually know what they're doing. But that's one start. And the coil, the very central part of the HVAC, sometimes will get mold in it. And so sometimes you have to replace the entire unit.
So that's the furnace.
Exactly. Well, the furnace or the air conditioner.
Right, or the
and then the kind of ducts that you have can so if you've got the old-fashioned ducts or even a ductless system, those are okay. But those corrugated ones, with the kind of accordion foil tubing, those love to gather condensation.
Gather it in there.
Exactly. You've got hills and valleys, and so in those valleys the condensation will accumulate, and then you can get mold growth in that. And then the air is blowing by that either toward the coil or away from the coil. Either way, it gets recirculated all around the house.
So lots of people don't have the money to, most people don't have the money to just change locations or gut their place and rebuild it. So if someone was ill and they came to you and they felt better, so now they know that it's the mold that's making them sick, but then they have to go home.
Yes.
So what do you think people should do about that? And how would they deal with that?
Yeah, in an ideal world, we would all be working together to solve this problem.
Yeah.
And we would be able to either remediate properly or get them into a different place. At this point, we're not in an ideal world. And remediators have, in the same way that there are doctors that know a lot about CIRS and others that don't know about it at all, it's really the same in the remediation world and in the mold testing world. There are some that are very conscious of the fact that people get quite ill from this illness, and they know techniques of how to fix somebody's house right the first time. And then there are others that just don't know.
Right, and if you go to somebody then who doesn't know, then you have to do it again. It's going to be, it would be better to go find someone who knows what they're doing, even if it is going to cost more.
Exactly. And how do you know who that is?
Right.
Because they talk as though they're experts, but they don't even know what they don't know. So at CIRS, if I can self-promote for a second, at CIRS, we've created a remediation course specifically for remediators. It's about, I think, 13, 14 hours long that show you all the techniques that you should do and how to clean and whatnot in somebody's house so that you do it right the first time.
So homeowners could also take that course so that they are aware.
Absolutely. And then that would give them some idea of questions that they should ask their remediators.
Right.
Because otherwise, I mean, they just don't know how little that they know. And that, you know, if you spend...
How long is this course, and is it online?
It's online at www.cirsx.com. And I think it's $495, which...
How long does it take?
14 hours,
Okay.
and there's a certification if you want to be certified. There's a level for professionals that you can be certified and get a badge, and then there's a level that you don't need to take the tests and things like that if you just want to get the knowledge.
And in the course, do you give them options of, because I know that you can buy test kits for your house, and so is that included in your course of how to do that or where to get that?
No, but there is another course that's coming out specifically for the mold testers, which will also be beneficial for patients. I call them patients, for people that have mold illness, because they're not all my patients.
No.
But for people that have sensitivities to mold, like we're talking about, because there's a lot of different ways of testing, and there's some tests that are better and some tests that are very landlord friendly, let's say. And of course, those are the ones that are done if you have an apartment, that you do the landlord friendly test.
Yeah, that's like taking some dust samples off the countertops, maybe.
Or even worse, like a spore trap test that 85% of the time misses Stachybotrys, which is one of the most common molds that we see.
And what does that cause, that one?
Oh, it can cause CIRS, but it can also make toxins that could potentially cause all sorts of different problems.
Right.
So Stachy is what people call the toxic black mold.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So not good.
Not good.
Yeah. And of course, if you have Stachybotrys, that means you've had water for a long time. You know, Stachy doesn't grow quickly. And Stachy, they say Stachy is sticky. I didn't know if you know that.
There you go.
Yeah, they stick to each other. And so the Stachybotrys tend to be around this level in your house. If you walk by, you know, it can rise up. But the testing method is at this level.
Oh.
And so it misses it. And the standard of the testing is that you're supposed to do the same test in the same room several times during the day in different locations so that you don't have sampling error. But nobody does that. They take one test from that room. And that's why it's so favorable for landlords, is because it has this huge sampling error. And if you don't happen to be in the right place, well, it says that everything is safe. But it's not.
Well, even when you're testing someone for, say, celiac disease or something like that, it's very hit and miss, right? Because you would have to do multiple tests, and at different times of the day, and everything to actually find out. But nobody does that.
But nobody does that.
They do it once, and they say, "Oh, you have it, or you don't have it."
Yeah, it's easier just to do the endoscopy, but that's kind of invasive and expensive. Yeah, agreed.
So I know, I'm not sure, but I think that the testing that is recommended is to bore holes in the wall.
So different testing for different circumstances. I think that the very best test to do is a DNA test. Right? And the DNA shows you if there has been mold or not. And then if you find it, but you can't see it with a visual inspection, that's when they'll start boring holes
I see.
in the cavities.
So you do a DNA test, and this is through a blood test? Is this a blood test?
So it's a DNA test on your home.
Oh, on your home?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so we'll do surface samples, but usually up high, like at a door jamb or on top of a ceiling fan. You don't have a ceiling fan here.
No, but
or something like that, where places where you don't tend to clean very often. And if we find elevated levels of DNA there, they're there for a reason.
What's DNA stand for?
The deoxyribonucleic acid.
Oh, yes.
So molds have DNA.
Okay.
Some have RNA. Bacteria have RNA. We have DNA and RNA.
Yeah.
So, and so you can find evidence that there has been mold there. Then the question is it old? like, did we do a previous remediation, we just didn't clean it? Or is it new, or is it ongoing? And so then you get a professional to come in, and if they can't find anything obvious like water damage and staining or ceiling leaks or things like that, then they start boring holes inside the cavities and they find it.
So what if, so say you have somebody and they don't believe that mold is a thing, because there's skepticism everywhere. And so they're going to think, well, you know, this mold, this water damage, whatever, to this window happened 10 years ago, and I fixed the window, and it isn't any problem anymore, but they didn't change the wood on the sill or anything. Is that a problem?
It certainly can be, particularly every time it rains. And if it starts raining and all of a sudden you start smelling musty smells again, you're just reactivating the mold that was there before, and it starts to grow even more. So yeah, that
What
can
about
still be a problem.
some old wood that is in your house? It's dry, it never gets wet, but it was an exterior building that was often wet, so there's definitely mold in it, but it's very, very old, and you put it on the wall.
Yeah, it could be a problem.
In what way would that be a problem?
So as you walk by it, if there is mold, or even dead molds can be damaging to people who have CIRS. See, CIRS is primarily an immune system illness. And your immune system is created, geared to detect when foreign microbes come into your body. But your immune system can't tell the difference between a live, active bacteria and one that's dead and just little fragments of it are floating around. So if you breathe that in, or if it's mold or actinobacteria, if you breathe that in, your body can't tell if that's something trying to infect you or something that is just dead and is not going to infect you. Either way, your immune system activates itself as though it's getting ready to go to war. And if you keep breathing it and keep breathing it and keep breathing it, that war happens, and you start making these chemicals, we call them cytokines, cytokines, and those cytokines just keep being produced, overproduced, and it's the cytokines that actually make you feel crummy. It's your own immune system's response to breathing in this foreign material that actually makes you feel crummy.
So then it'll start to create inflammation to fight it?
Exactly.
Or mucus, maybe?
That's a part of it. So it's the immune system's response that actually is making the inflammation. So your body is doing it. Now, most people don't know this, but if you were to get the flu, and you feel achy and maybe a little feverish, and maybe your brain's not working quite right, your muscles hurt, your joints hurt, you're sleepy, maybe you have a headache, all of those symptoms come not from the flu virus directly, but from your body's response to the flu virus. Your immune system response causes all those symptoms. Now imagine if you had the flu all the time, and you had those symptoms all the time. That's what most people with CIRS experience, is this inflamed feeling all the time, and it can affect any part of the body. Pretty awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then probably, if that's the case, then they're on medication, pain medication, all the time.
Absolutely. And here's an even worse part about it. If you're a doctor and you're treating this patient and you don't know about CIRS and you don't know about mold-based illness, well, then maybe you think they have chronic fatigue syndrome, or maybe you think they have fibromyalgia, or if they're having gut problems, maybe it's irritable bowel syndrome, or maybe they're depressed, or maybe it's celiac, or maybe it's maybe it's lupus, maybe it's rheumatoid arthritis, and you don't know. And you run the tests for those things, because not all of them have tests to rule them in or rule them out, but you run the tests that you know to run, and they all come out normal. So then you think this person is either, it's all in their head and they need to go see the psychiatrist, or if you're honest, you just say, well, I don't know what's wrong with you. Right. But my experience is there aren't many physicians that are humble enough to say, I don't know what's wrong with you. Mm-hmm. And so they start treating you for something that you don't have. Now you're taking medicine, which has side effects and expense, for something that you don't even have. So guess what? It doesn't work. And you still don't know what's really wrong with you. And so you're not getting the proper treatment. And that's where our medical system is right now.
I was just thinking about little kids who pee their pants.
That's
one of the symptoms, isn't it?
That's one of the symptoms. So as a pediatrician, children who are under 6 years of age, we expect them to be toilet trained, usually by around 3, but it's still considered normal if you're not toilet trained until you're 6 years old. And there's still like 10% of kids that are not toilet trained, and most of those are boys. You know, you girls, you're just so much more mature than we are. So girls get toilet trained at a much younger age, boys not so good. Even at 18 years of age, 1% of people still are not toilet trained. Did you know that? I
wonder if it has something to do with being disagreeable, because you do not want to be subject to your body.
Maybe.
You know?
They have related it to people that are deep sleepers, and so the urge to go to the bathroom doesn't wake them up. Mm-hmm. What we found in our kids that are 6 years and older that are still potty training is that they often have CIRS. Not always, but they often do. And what we notice is that they are deficient in a chemical called antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic hormone is made by the hypothalamus in your brain in conjunction and stored in the pituitary. And when your body senses that you need to get rid of free water, right, so you want to urinate a lot, you don't secrete a lot of the antidiuretic hormone, and so your kidney just makes a lot of urine and you pee. But at nighttime, and this is really the process of how you become toilet trained, at nighttime you realize that it's not good to wake up and go to the bathroom, and it's not good to wet the bed, so you start secreting more antidiuretic hormone at nighttime. And so you still make some urine, but not as much. And then when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you do is you go to the bathroom and you empty your bladder. Mm-hmm. But if you can't make adequate antidiuretic hormone because you have inflammatory processes that are affecting that, then you just pee and pee and pee. And you keep voiding, and as a result of that, you become thirsty. So then you start drinking and drinking and drinking, but because you don't have any antidiuretic hormone, you just keep peeing and peeing and peeing. That's what we see in adults. In children, that same process, we see them wetting their beds.
Right.
So when I see children now that are 6 or older and they're wetting their beds, I start asking them if they have other symptoms, like headaches or chronic fatigue or stomach issues. And I screen them for the normal things you would screen children for, but also for CIRS.
Now what about constipation?
So constipation is on a different spectrum. You can see that. In my CIRS patients, they're usually having diarrhea also. They're going back and forth. They'll have diarrhea 2-3 times a month at least. These are young kids. Yeah, so they can be related. So there are other things obviously that can cause that. But in the medical realm, we talk about what's called the differential diagnosis, which is, okay, there's 50 things we know that can cause constipation. What can we rule out? What can we prove is there? And so that's what we go through. And if you're also having diarrhea at the same time, CIRS is very high on the list.
I see. Well, that's good to know, because parents are always wondering why their kids are having like pee in their pants. And then kids, there's a lot of shame that goes along with something like that. And if you know that it's a consequence of a health issue, then at least they don't have to feel shame.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And if I might, there's one other problem that's really, really common in pediatrics, and that's recurrent stomach issues. It could be actual pains, or it could be, I just don't feel like eating or whatnot. When I was in residency, Duke was a great residency. I got a tremendous education there. I have nothing negative to say about that. Go Devils. When I was at Duke, they taught us that most of the kids that were having stomach aches, if you couldn't demonstrate some reason for it, like urinary tract infection or chronic constipation or things like that, that it was a behavioral issue, that they were trying to get out of something. Either they knew they were trying to get out of something, like they didn't want to go to school because they hadn't studied for the history test, or it was more of a deep-seated psychological issue, what we call not what your husband might call a secondary gain, where like there's a bully there and they don't think about it, but they don't really want to go to school because they don't want to get bullied. And I'm sure that those cases occur. And the reason we come to those conclusions is because we've done every test that we know to do, and we haven't found anything abnormal that would explain why you're having the stomach ache. Okay. But what if there were tests that you didn't know about that are positive almost every time, or abnormal almost every time? That's what we see with CIRS. With my children that we're having in my practice, and at this point we're talking 700 kids who were having stomach issues. When I did the CIRS lab test, they would come out positive about 90% of the time.
Wow.
And then I would treat them with the standard therapy, and about 90% of the time they would get better, or their stomach aches would go away. And this is one of the most common problems in pediatrics. Now in adults, they call it functional abdominal pain syndrome. And I read somewhere that this is the #1 reason for adults to go see their primary care doctor in the entire United States. The #1 reason. And almost nobody knows what the cause is. They call it
a stomach ache, is it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a stomach ache. And they call it functional, which is a nice way of saying it's all in your head. There's not really anything organic going on. It's just all in your head. But if you don't do the right lab tests, you won't find the right answers. Isn't that sinister?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though. We're always trying to cover our bases and make sense of the world in our favor. There's all that kind of motivation.
In our favor. That's quite the insight. I think you're right.
Oh, yeah, I think so. People, that wishful thinking, we call that. Wishful thinking, right?
Right.
You want it to end up going in this direction.
And I have kind of an extension of that theory is, doctors oftentimes are in life and death situations. Thank God for me, it's not very often, but it happens. I mean, it happened this week. I was in a life or death situation. And so we really need to have confidence in ourselves and our knowledge and our skills and the application of those skills. And I think it's difficult for many practitioners to say, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what's wrong with you. Because we create the space within ourselves where we do know a lot of things, but obviously not everything. And so I think it's difficult for many doctors to say, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah, well, doctors are, I know this is the case because I was very, very sick, right? And when I was told the diagnosis or the prognosis, I just believed that as truth instead of a possibility.
Right.
Right? Okay, that's an educated guess. I mean, it's not just an educated guess. There were lab tests and there were maybe biopsies and there's all kind of things that went into this, but it's still not exactly fact.
Yeah.
There's error.
We're
There's
very
error
good
in
at convincing
everything,
you.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're very good at, and we have come to believe, and I don't know when this began, that doctors have the answer to everything.
Right.
And so then that makes people be in a very tricky situation of getting a diagnosis or a prognosis and just believing it instead of questioning it. And questioning it, maybe looking elsewhere, asking other people, praying, like asking in some other way, is this my destiny? Or maybe there's something else I don't know.
Right.
But we don't do that anymore. We just say, oh, okay.
Right. And even though the knowledge in medicine supposedly doubles every 2 years.
Yeah.
And who can keep up with that?
Right.
I mean, it's not possible. I mean, since I've been out of residency, the knowledge has doubled 16 times.
Wow.
I mean, can't keep up. So with that, we become more and more specialized. And what happens is you can't see the forest for the trees.
Right.
And this is definitely a forest illness. Right? But if you can only see this tree or that tree or that tree, you're going to miss it. And so most doctors are not aware.
You know, one thing I've thought of, and this is kind of a random thought, but there's all these people that are homeless. They're living outside. I wonder if when they go inside, they feel worse. Then they go outside and they feel better. And even though it's an unstable place to be and very difficult, for some reason, being inside is not their choice. And I wonder if mold has something to do with that.
That's a really interesting thought. I don't think you can say for all of them, but I bet it's a part of it.
Yeah, it might be part of it.
Right. I do know patients that live in their backyard. Right. Because they don't have the resources to sell their house or build a house, or they can't find an apartment that they feel good in. They leave their stuff in the house and they pitch a tent in the backyard. I've known people who rented apartments and they slept outside on the landing at nighttime. I've known people that have taken like minivans and they've just stripped all the upholstery out, turned the air conditioning off, taped over the vents, and they live in that. I had one person who went to medical school, living in a vehicle basically, and he was very ingenious, and he found a way to put a refrigerator in there and make it doable. Made it all the way through medical school.
Yeah, so I kind of wonder about that. We have a nice lake house, but it was, when it was built and the windows were put in, they used caulking around the windows, but over time that shrinks, so then water can get in.
Sure.
And so I bought a trailer, so we go to the lake and I sleep in the trailer.
There you go. There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you do what you have to do.
You do what you have to do.
Yeah.
I know a family that the entire family got sick in mold. They bought a trailer, 250 square feet. There's like 5 of them. And they lived in that, and they paid a builder to build them a new house. And unfortunately, when the builder built the new house, they vented both the toilets into the attic and didn't make the penetrations go through the roof.
Oh dear.
And so within 3 months of the time they were living there, the attic was full of mold.
Oh yeah. And
they made some mistakes in the crawl space too. And so it's like a sandwich there. And so now they live in the trailer and they feel much better in the trailer. So 250 square feet.
And we're not taught either to listen to our intuition, and you have to. One time I can remember we'd gone out whale watching. It was a nice day and everything, but then we came back and we decided we'd go for dinner, and we walked into a Chinese restaurant. I'd never been there before, and as soon as I walked in, I thought, oh, this isn't a good restaurant. But I didn't know what I meant by that. But now I think it was probably moldy in there.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. A number of our patients have that kind of, I don't know if intuition is the right word. They walk in and they can feel something change in their body within a few seconds.
Nose starts running.
Could be nose. Different people, it's different symptoms.
You have to go to the bathroom and have
to
a pee right away.
Get a headache, eyes start to burn, stomach issues. And it'll be the same symptom every time that they go into a moldy building.
Yeah.
And I teach people to pay attention to that.
Yeah, pay attention.
Yeah, when you get that, just regardless of what everybody else tells you, get out of there as quickly as you can.
Yeah. There's another place to be. You don't have to be there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I agree.
The more exposure you get, the sicker you get.
Yeah, because I'm sure over the years, I can think back now on times where it was a house that we were going to buy, and I walked in and I said, I just looked at it and I just said, no way. And I'm sure it was probably moldy in there, but I didn't know. I just felt this overwhelming negative feeling, and I just said, no way. So that may be a mold indication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen to your body.
Listen to your body, yeah. But I wouldn't have known that this was the problem until Michaela brought it to our attention. Because she had like severe reactions. My reactions, they might be severe, because I've been diagnosed with chronic diseases through genetic testing and stuff that I didn't even know I had. So I imagine that's mold related.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Do you feel like you're getting better?
Well, I'm alive. I am alive.
We thank God for that.
Yeah, and it's still it's early on still in my treatment, so we'll see how things go as time goes by.
Okay.
But I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful too.
Yeah, I don't know if you can reverse. Once you have a diagnosis of something like fibromyalgia or lupus or something, if that can be reversed, or does it just?
I think
is it always there?
I think it depends on how the diagnosis was made, to be honest with you. Like lupus, for instance, is diagnosed in the same way that CIRS is. So you have a certain number of abnormalities out of these certain potentials, then you have lupus. And a few of those are objective, but you don't have to have any objective lab tests to come up with a diagnosis of lupus. And as I recall, there's really only one pathognomonic test, which means if you have this test is abnormal, yes, you have lupus, and that's it. And most people with lupus, that test is negative. So do they have that? I mean, the overlap with CIRS, for instance, is pretty dramatic. And pretty much all of the symptoms that you can get in lupus, you can get in CIRS too, as an example. So
I'm hopeful.
Yeah, I think it's the same with multiple sclerosis. Fibromyalgia doesn't have any markers.
Right. It just has certain sensitive points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
what about Sjogren's?
Sjogren's syndrome, there's a considerable overlap too, because we were talking about how people urinate a lot, and as a result of that, they get thirsty and their mouth gets dry, and dry eye is an inflammatory process that nobody really knows what causes it. So some of the hallmark symptoms of Sjogren's syndrome are very common symptoms in CIRS. Now, there are antibodies that you can have with Sjogren's syndrome. I've seen some of those. I've seen people that had like an SSA antibody, which is the Sjogren's syndrome antibody, and when they were treated for CIRS, their SSA went away.
Oh, wow.
I've seen many people, their ANA, anti-nuclear antibody, I've seen those go away also with successful CIRS treatment. So is there an overlap between the illnesses? Are they portions of each other? Is there something else going on, or is one just being misdiagnosed? Hard to know. I just know that I've seen many people get better who have those. Now, time is an issue also. So if you were to take somebody who had fibromyalgia and I were to meet them in their first 5 years of symptoms and they actually had CIRS and we treat them, I've seen fibromyalgia just go away completely, like 100% or 90%. If they've had it for 15, 20 years, I think that there's some secondary damage that's gone on, maybe at the neuromuscular plate or whatnot, and they have less improvement. Some, but less improvement.
I see. Yeah, right. Well, that makes sense. That's why if children are young, you can treat them pretty quickly, I imagine.
Yes. Children are so easy to treat most of the time. And children can have 100% improvement. I never tell adults, expect 100% improvement, but we do expect 70 to 90% improvement. But I never tell adults that you're going to get 100% improvement. 5-year-olds, like 2 weeks of therapy, and they can be back to normal. It's really amazing. And then some of the more dramatic ones, I mean, I've had children that could only eat 3 items. They could eat chicken, they could eat rice, and 1 vegetable. They could only drink water. Everything else either made them sick, made them vomit, or they would turn gray. We've used some therapies like VIP with them at very low doses.
That's a nose spray.
That's the nose spray. And within a couple of months, they're like almost back to normal. We had one young lady, she was a teenager, she'd been out of school for 4 years, or just short of 4 years. And we started VIP on her, and within like 2-3 months, she was back to school. Almost 4 years.
Jeez, yeah. Oh, dear.
Yeah. And then behavioral issues. Like a 3-year-old who is not having the normal temper tantrums, they go on for 5 or 10 minutes. They were screaming for 3 straight hours. And then when we put them on VIP, treated their CIRS and put them on VIP, and it went away within less than a month. And if they missed a dose, it would be back again. And after a while, we were able to take them off VIP and no more of the behavioral issues. Pretty crazy.
Yes, it's not.
So it really adds to, for physicians, it adds to the differential diagnosis of what could be causing this kind of behavior that I might not understand why they're doing it.
Yes, and especially before you give kids medication.
Absolutely.
Right? Because you don't want to give kids medication if you can find out what's wrong with them. So doing all of the testing to find out what it might be.
Yes.
And that mold can be, I mean, there's how many of our buildings have mold in them?
The United States.
That's a rough question, but
the United States EPA says between 50 and 85%.
Right. So it's likely.
It's likely.
It's likely.
Yeah. ADHD is another illness. I mean, I've been able to take kids off of their stimulant medicines and put them on the Shoemaker protocol. Occasionally they need VIP, usually they don't, and they've been able to come off their stimulant medicine completely and do just fine at school. In fact, do better at school.
Why do you think there's so many kids who have autism? I have to ask you that.
I think that's a loaded question. In part, we've changed the definition. We've added and made it, but that doesn't explain like the huge change in numbers that we've seen. I think part of the answer is that since 1900, we've been exposed to over 300,000 new chemicals, and I don't think that they have all been properly vetted. And I think that it is going to...
In our food, on our food?
In our food, in our breathing, in just everywhere that we go.
Because RFK is talking about, our food and how much chemical trouble there is.
Yeah. Food, water, air.
Food, water, and air.
Yeah, so pretty much everything that we bring in. Now let's look at CIRS, okay? Let's say you're a mom and you've got a little fetus growing inside you. And the mom has a genetic predisposition. Or let's say she has a genetic predisposition from both sides of her family. She has absolutely no protection for herself, which means she can't really offer any protection for the baby inside her. And that baby inside her will definitely have, from the mom, the genetic contribution that she gives you will be one to develop illness. And if you got that from dad also, now this baby has no protection of its own. And if that mom is living in a water damaged building or working in one or both, who knows what's going on in that brain? We just don't know. What I can tell you is I've seen children who were ahead of the curve, who were doing great. And then they moved into a moldy building, or they had a hurricane in their area and it caused flooding in their apartment. And 6 months later, they were now being called autistic. And then they got treated for CIRS, and they came right back to where they were before, top of the class, socially doing well, and just being, neurotypical. I know that CIRS can have a part of it. I wouldn't go as far to say that all kids who have autism have CIRS, but I'm sure it plays a part of it.
Something to rule out, though.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And if it's, I've had good experience with kids who were neurotypical, became neuroatypical, and were able to go back. I have a friend, Jody DeShore, who's in New Jersey, who does a lot of work with autism with kids around the world, who's been able to deal with kids that haven't necessarily had water events, but treats them through her protocol for treating CIRS, which is very similar to the Shoemaker, but she's created her own products.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
So she's very interesting.
And how long has she been around?
Oh, I've known her at this point for at least 10 years.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
And that's in New York, you said?
She's in New Jersey.
New Jersey.
Yeah, just outside of New York. I'd be happy to introduce you guys.
Yeah. Well, that would be good for people on the Eastern Seaboard and people in Canada, too, because New York's close to, Toronto and Montreal. And all that.
And she's been all over Europe giving talks, and she sees patients in other countries also.
And so say somebody is living in a house that's an older house, and they find out that, there's water damage. There's been water damage because the windows aren't great, because they're old windows. And but other than that, their house doesn't seem to be in terrible condition. How much leeway is there for a house? Because you're never going to get a perfect house. Maybe a Firewall house could be a perfect house. But other than that, how 100%, with my daughter, it's as if it has to be 100%. But not everyone is that sensitive.
She's very special.
Yeah, she's very sensitive,
Yeah.
right? She could go into buildings and tell people if the buildings are good or not. She could make lots of money doing that.
Except she gets sick doing it.
Except she gets sick doing it, so she's not going to do it. But I'm wondering, people young families, they have their little kids, and they want to know if their house is if they look into where there's trouble, do they have to take action like right now? Is there time to wait? How clean does it have to be? I guess that depends on the severity of the symptoms.
That's correct. It depends on the severity of symptoms. There's only one test that has ever been shown in the literature that actually correlates with human health symptoms. And that's one of the DNA tests that I was talking about earlier. So it's called a HERTSMI-2, HERTSMI-2, the number. Mm-hmm. And the HERTSMI-2 has a rating score. It looks for 5 very common molds that are found in water-damaged buildings. And it has a rating score for the amount that's found, the amount of DNA that's found for each one. If that total is 10 or less, people are very likely to be able to reoccupy. It's 98% of people should be able to occupy that building who have CIRS and do well with it, and only 2% will not do well.
Right. So if, say, people have gone for treatment, say at your clinic, and they want to go back to their house and they have it remediated, they can do that test to find out if it's suitable or not for them.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So we recommend that.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. But how perfect does it have to be?
Guess it depends on the person.
I think that if you see signs of water damage, stains on the ceiling, stains on the walls, if you can smell it, if you can see visible mold, it's not good enough.
It's not.
It's not good enough.
But what if you can't see anything?
So if you can get rid of all of those things, okay, the next thing to do is a DNA test to see if you have it. And if you do, then that leads to the question, is this historical? Is this from 20 years ago and that's all been remediated and it's taken care of, or is this active? And so oftentimes what the indoor environmental professionals will recommend is doing a really thorough cleaning throughout the house, one room at a time, fogging the air, cleaning all the surfaces.
Fogging the air with what?
So usually something like Aerosolver, that's AEROSOLVER. There are other things that you can use too. And the idea of fogging the air is that for every spore that you see, that you find on spore trap testing, that's the pump that's at about 3 to 4 feet. For every spore that you find, there are between 320 and 514 fragments of old dead molds floating around in that air. And those are probably worse for you because when you breathe, they get farther down your respiratory tract because they're much smaller. They don't get trapped by the hairs of your nose as well, or the mucus or whatnot, and they go down, and that's where the problem is probably happening primarily, is as those things get to your lungs, your immune system looks at them, they see that they're foreign and they're not you, and that's what activates the immune system. So if you do that kind of cleaning and you fog, the moisture can grab onto one of those particles and cause it to drop down to the ground or stick to the walls. And then you clean the walls and the ceiling and the floor in a particular way. And you can make your air as pristine as it can possibly be, almost to safe room levels, almost.
I think Mick has a system for the HVAC that brings in outdoor air.
Oh, okay, good.
And she finds that.
And that way you
very
dilute
helpful.
it, and that's a great idea.
Right.
So you can do that, and then you can wait. You have to wait a few weeks until you get enough dust again, and then you can test that again with that same test. If you see that it's cleared up, then it was historical from a long time ago kind of problem. If you see it hasn't cleared up, well, you're going to have to find where that problem is. You get an indoor environmental professional to come and look around and drill into your walls and things like that. Exactly.
To sniff around.
A mold dog.
I saw one of those at work.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. Mick had someone come to the house, and I was there, and that was pretty cool. He was really interested in finding that, because if he could find that, then he had a reward, right? So he was, and he did find where it was, even if it was behind the drywall.
Yeah, exactly.
So well, dogs, they have great sense of
They
smell.
do. I've had some patients that can do that too.
Right.
That they can go into a room, maybe your daughter can do that,
Yeah.
but they can actually tell you where the problem is.
Huh.
You know, they can come in and say, it's behind this wall.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not a sensitivity that I want, or
No,
a gift.
Because you could be very, very sick if that's the case.
Exactly.
You don't want to wish for that, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But it could be helpful. Well, I think I'm out of questions.
Okay. Do you mind if I mention my podcast?
Oh, please do.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, this is a new podcast.
I have a new podcast.
Oh, that's exciting.
It is very exciting. We've been planning this for months. I am so excited. It's called Medicine and Miracles.
Okay.
And so I start with something in medicine. You know, like one time I think I explained what is multisystem illness, and another time we would just kind of break down CIRS and try and understand what it is. And so we've got different things. We talk about that for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we segue into describing a miracle that I've seen. Mm-hmm. And I've seen people that were completely healed of illnesses. I've had my own experiences of healing. We actually, about a month ago, this may take your breath away, saw somebody raised from the dead.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Really?
Oh, yes. I was there. And this guy had been sitting in the same position for 25 minutes.
Yeah.
And by the time he was found, because I had seen him 25 minutes earlier. And when I came down to look, it's like, his lips were white.
Yeah.
His fingers were white. There was, nice. There was no blood flow. He was not breathing, no heart rate. He was cold.
Yeah. Oh.
He was cold.
Yeah.
And then started breathing again, and in 15 minutes was normal.
And what brought him back? Do you know?
So at the time while I'm assessing him, I've got my hand on his heart because I've already checked his pulses and whatnot. There's nothing. There were 2 other people there. They had hands. We were all praying silently.
Yeah.
And I'm getting ready to tell them he's dead. We need to call 911. And we need to be praying for him to come back to life. And as I'm getting ready to say that,
oh, wow.
It was impressive.
Wow.
And by that time, there were about a half dozen other people
ago
there.
Had he had a breath?
We don't know because it
know?
wasn't witnessed, but he was literally in the same position that I had seen him in 25 minutes earlier.
Holy crow. Wow.
Yeah. So I was like,
when did this
wow,
happen?
this was 4 weeks ago.
Oh, my goodness. Still
4
fresh in your
weeks
memory.
ago. Yeah. So I've seen lots of miracles. I've experienced miracles. And so that's what we do. We talk a little bit about medicine. We talk a little bit about the miracles and how it all
that
works
sounds
together.
Fun.
I think it's fun.
I think that sounds like great fun.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's really cool. So we've got 4 episodes out, and the new episodes drop every Tuesday. Right now we're on Spotify, iHeart, and Amazon, and we will soon be on YouTube. That's the other one, YouTube, and we're working toward TikTok.
Yeah.
Got to have more
Rumble.
content.
You should go on Rumble too.
On Rumble, that's a great idea.
Yeah. That would be good.
Absolutely. So very exciting.
Oh, well, congratulations and good luck with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much.
Well, it's really good to meet you, and I really appreciate you coming. This is quite a journey. It takes a while, but it's I think it's worth the journey just to see how. I'm always curious to see if I can make my health better.
Absolutely.
You know, that's just been one of my goals since I was a little kid. I always had stomach aches when I was a kid, so I've always been looking to feel better.
Right.
And that just hasn't gone away.
Well, we talked about that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I used to pee my pants when I was a little girl,
Oh,
so
I'm
I'm sure. And I know that I have that that CIRS marker in my genetics, and so at least I know that now, so that I can forgive myself for the little things that I did when I was a kid that I had no control over.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you forgive yourself of everything.
Everything, yeah, that's right. Working on it.
Right. Well, and I'm very thankful for your desire to seek out the truth, not only as it works for you, as it reflects on you and your own health, but then also spread the awareness of that to the millions of people that...
Yeah, I didn't see a choice in that. You know, when I was very sick, I didn't really consciously pray to God, but I was, for sure. And I said, yeah, I was pretty conscious. I pretty much said at one point, silently, so nobody could hear, just a real private prayer. And I said, God, if you see fit to spare me, I promise I'll speak publicly. So I've had no choice in the matter, which is kind of good, because sometimes we have so many choices we don't know what to do. I had no choice.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Cool.
Okay.
Oh,
great.
Can I tell you one other thing?
Yeah.
Now that we're off and all. I mean, not that it couldn't have been on, but sure. So I told you that originally I was going to give that talk, and I didn't have a title, and I prayed, and I got the title. So I gave the talk.
Yeah.
Okay. And at that time I was a newlywed, and my wife was there, but she didn't come to my talk. Can you believe that? We're on our honeymoon. You didn't come to my talk? Anyway, so I gave the talk. It was a great talk, and I came back to the hotel room, and I'm sitting in the hotel room, and I'm just thanking God. It's like, wow, you gave me an impossible thing to do, and you made it happen. And I'm just so thankful and grateful, and it turned out great, super. At this point, I didn't realize I'm going to spend the rest of my life treating these people. And he mentioned, it's like, mold's in the Bible. It's like, what? And so I looked it up, and sure enough, found it on Google. And it's like, yeah, I guess it is. I'd never seen that before. And then he gave me a vision. I don't get visions a lot, but I had a vision. And on it, there was this girl. She was probably 25 years old. And she was on her knees by her bed praying. And she said, God, what's wrong with me? I feel awful. I hurt. I can't sleep. My brain doesn't work right. I'm just exhausted. I go to the doctor, they tell me that I'm slacking, they tell me I'm lazy, they tell me, I'm depressed, they tell me I need to see a psychiatrist. Do something! And at the moment that I heard her say that, do something, it was like the echo of hundreds, if not thousands of people praying the same prayer. And it was at that moment that I realized that God was saying, I want you to be a part of the solution.
Right.
And so that was the moment, that was in late January of 2010. That's the moment when the whole trajectory of my life changed. And I started saying, okay, I got to find out about this. I got to learn more. I'm going to be involved in seeing these people and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just destiny, hey?
It's destiny. That's exactly what it is. And I realized that this is a part of my destiny that I wasn't aware of. And now I realize, podcasts and stuff is a part of my destiny that I wasn't aware of. So here it comes.
Here it comes. That sounds, I like doing podcasts. I never knew I'd like doing this. I had to find out something to do because we were traveling all the time.
Right.
And we were on tour all the time. And the first time we'd gone on tour, I was asking myself, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? Because I didn't really feel like I was doing logistics and getting Jordan to the show and all of that, but I didn't really feel like I had a purpose that was meaningful.
Right.
And so the next time we went on tour, I thought, wait a minute, I have to answer this question that I asked the last time we went on tour. And I had been praying the rosary, and not very long after my illness, right? I thought, well, I'd like to learn more about that. And Jonathan Pajot, who's a good friend of ours, and he's an Orthodox Christian, but I know him very well. And I wasn't too shy to ask him. I asked him if he would, let me interview him. So I interviewed him 3 or 4 times, quite a few times. And
get some practice.
Yeah, I did. I got some practice. And then I started to get braver. And then I started asking people. And I found out I really like doing this. I love to learn. I like to listen. I was a massage therapist. I like to listen to people. I learn things when I listen to people.
And you answer, or you ask good questions.
Well, I'm listening.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to listen, right? Learning to listen. Truly listen and not try to guide things the way I think they should go, but actually listen. So thank you for that.
Thank you. This is an honor.
I think we could add that little story in there.
It's up to you.
That's a great story.
Is a life-changing story.
Yeah, that's a great story. No wonder you do what you do.
Yeah.
Right? No wonder you do what you do.
It's at this point, it becomes like my calling.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I mean, I knew when I was 4 that I was going to be a doctor.
Oh, wow.
And I had a relatively rough childhood, and that hope was always there. Someday I'm going to be a doctor, and it's going to be all better.
Yeah.
Okay? So I got to there, and I'm a doctor now, and it's not all better. And,
right.
And that's what led me to meet Jesus. Okay? Is like, it's not all better. I've been holding on to this for my whole life, and it's not. So what am I missing?
Yeah.
And so that led to becoming a Christian. And then, had other, like really key moments where things just kind of turned. Couldn't have expected it, but it was a divine intervention. And this is one of them.
Yeah. Well, God, he sends us on mission, doesn't he?
He does.
Yeah.
Make the world a better place.
Yeah, and it's so exciting to be sent on. It's difficult. You have to ask for courage and strength to do it.
Right.
Because it's not easy. He doesn't say, "Oh, well, now your life's going to be a piece of cake." No.
Right.
That's not the kind.
That has not happened yet.
No, that hasn't happened. And people think that Christians are, just that's an excuse or something, that it's an easy way out or something. No, that's not what it is at all. It's a very tight rope that you walk, and it's very challenging. That's what it is.
It is. But as you get to know God better, your faith in his reliability or his faithfulness becomes greater, and you realize that he's going to bring you through every situation, and usually as the victor. And so that's what I base my life on. So when he gives me pediatric mold exposure : the next great epidemic ? It's like, that's not the first time he's given me something out that's, from my point of view, outrageous.
Yeah.
But he's been faithful every time to bring it to some degree of victory.
Yeah.
And so gives me more ability to trust in the next crazy thing that I'm off on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It gives you the proper feedback.
Exactly.
And that's what he wants to, is for us to have more faith and to trust.
Exactly.
So that we'll keep at it, and then he can count on us more.
That's right.
Yeah.
So what's next?
Yeah, I don't know. That's the fun part. I don't know.
So, I mean, I'm 62, and I figure that's middle age, because, we're supposed to live to 120, aren't we? And, it's like, I see these mountains and some valleys, but mostly mountains, and it's like, what's next? Let's do this.
Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. What could be more interesting?
It's an exciting time of life. And then there's the craziness, in the world around us. So
yes, that's for sure.
You guys have experienced some of that, I think.
Yeah, although we see a lot of goodness.
Okay.
Mostly. That's what we see.
Oh, really?
We really do, yeah.
Okay.
A lot of the trouble is online. I mean, really all of the trouble is online. Because, there's nobody there to tell people when they're not towing the line properly.
Right.
So people can be whoever they want to online, and they get way out of line because of that. Whereas, men, especially men, are very good at keeping other men in line. But online you can't do that.
There's no accountability.
And women now who are in the workforce and everywhere, like men, if you're with a group of men and one is misbehaving, you'll set him right.
Right.
What do you do if there's a woman there? You can't set her right.
No, you can't.
So what do you do with crazy women? There's nothing we can do.
That's right.
This could be the end of everything, because there's nothing we can do.
The Bible says that it's better to live on the corner of the rooftop than in the house with a contentious wife.
Right.
And I've come to that same conclusion. What they're saying is, if you have an out-of-line woman who will not take correction, there's nothing you can do.
There is nothing you can do, because you can't You can't punch her like you can punch a man.
Right.
Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, you go to jail.
So then what do? You can't right that wrong. So, yikes.
Right.
So it's really up to women but even as a woman with other women, there's not a lot you can do. You can talk to them, you can reason with them, you can support them. But if someone's bent on being evil, I don't know, it's pretty, well, you pray for them and hope that things will right themselves. That's about all you can do, but in God's time.
Right.
Which isn't our time.
No, it's not. I would do it much faster.
Yeah, that's right. It would be a whirlwind, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
If we did everything in our own time, it would
Oh,
just
my
cause
gosh.
all kinds of mayhem. We've tried it.
I don't think we understand the consequences of putting people in those positions.
Right.
Yeah, because, then your whole world becomes tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's probably good that I'm not God.
Yeah, you do.